You are about to give birth. There is no hospital. There is no doctor. There is only your body, your breath, and the people who chose to stay close to you. For most of human history, this wasn't a nightmare scenario. It was simply Tuesday. Roughly 300,000 years of Homo sapiens history happened before the first hospital delivery room ever existed. So how did your ancestors actually do it? And why does your own body still carry the evidence of that struggle, written into your bones? Let's start with a strange fact. Human childbirth is unusually difficult compared to almost every other primate. A chimpanzee gives birth in minutes, often alone, and simply walks away afterward. Human labor can take 12, 18, sometimes 24 hours. Why? Anthropologist Wenda Trevathan has spent much of her career studying this exact question. She calls it the obstetrical dilemma. Here's the plain English version. When early humans started walking upright on two legs, their hip bones had to narrow to support the new posture efficiently. A narrow pelvis is great for walking. It's terrible for delivering a baby with a large head. At the same time, human brains were getting bigger. Bigger brain, bigger skull, narrower birth canal. Something had to give. The solution nature landed on is remarkable. Human babies are born earlier than other primates, relative to brain development, with skulls that are still soft and unfused. Your fontanelle, that soft spot on a newborn's head, exists because of this exact evolutionary bottleneck. The plates of the skull can shift and overlap during birth to fit through a narrow passage. But there's a second, even stranger consequence of this tight fit. The human birth canal doesn't just narrow. It twists. A baby has to rotate as it descends, entering facing one direction and exiting facing another, usually facing away from the mother's body. This single anatomical detail changes everything about how ancient birth actually worked. Think about it. If the baby faces away from the mother, she cannot easily reach down, guide the head, or check for a wrapped umbilical cord the way a chimpanzee mother can. Trevathan's research suggests this rotation is a major reason human childbirth became a social event rather than a solitary one. You needed help. Not because you were weak. Because your own anatomy made solo delivery dangerous. So who helped? Archaeological and ethnographic evidence points to something consistent across cultures separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years. Older women. Grandmothers, aunts, experienced mothers who had already survived birth themselves. Anthropologist Karen Rosenberg, who has worked alongside Trevathan on this research, points out that this pattern shows up in hunter-gatherer societies studied across Africa, South America, and the Arctic, groups with no contact with each other, all independently arriving at the same solution. Birth attendants weren't a modern medical invention. They were a deep evolutionary adaptation. Picture it. A shelter of woven branches or animal hide, close to the fire, but shielded from wind. The laboring woman is upright, not lying flat, often squatting, kneeling, or supported from behind by another woman's arms. Gravity helps. Upright positions were the near-universal default before the modern hospital bed made lying down the norm. Around her, 2 or 3 women murmur instructions, pass water, press warm hands against her lower back. Somewhere nearby, a fire keeps a pot of water heating. There is no silence. There is chanting, low conversation, sometimes singing, because sound and rhythm helped labor progress and helped everyone stay calm. This wasn't primitive. It was practiced, repeated knowledge, passed from woman to woman for thousands of generations, refined the way any skill is refined through repetition. Still, refined knowledge did not mean safety. This is the counterintuitive twist most people don't expect. Skeletal evidence from sites studied by bioarchaeologists suggests maternal mortality in prehistoric populations was staggeringly high by modern standards, likely somewhere between 1 and 2% of births ending in the mother's death, with even higher rates of infant mortality. Multiply that across a lifetime of several pregnancies, and the math becomes brutal. Childbirth may have been the single most dangerous recurring event in a woman's life, more dangerous, statistically, than hunting was for men. And yet humans kept having children, and populations grew anyway, generation after generation. Why? Because the same social structure that made birth possible also made survival afterward possible. This is the part textbooks often skip. Anthropologist James Sussman, who has studied surviving hunter-gatherer societies, like the Jew/Hoyansi of the Kalahari, describes birth not as an isolated medical event but as the moment an entire small community reorganized itself around a mother and infant. Other women would nurse a child if the mother couldn't. Food was shared without expectation of immediate return. A newborn wasn't just one family's responsibility. It belonged, in a very real sense, to the group. This cooperative model, sometimes called alloparenting by researchers, meaning care provided by someone other than the biological parent, may be one of the most underrated survival technologies our species ever developed. It wasn't invented by any single genius. It emerged because the alternative, a lone mother facing the obstetrical dilemma completely by herself, simply didn't work often enough to sustain a population. Now reconstruct the fuller scene. It's dusk. The orange light is fading behind the trees. A woman has been in labor since midday. She kneels, supported under the arms by her mother on one side, and a younger woman on the other. A third woman kneels in front, ready to receive the child, watching, waiting, calling out encouragement time to each contraction. When the baby is finally born, facing away from the mother just as Trevathan's research predicts, it is the birth attendant, not the mother, who first catches the child, clears its airway, and places it against its mother's chest. The cord is cut with a sharpened stone tool or a sharp reed, sometimes tied off with plant fiber. The afterbirth is handled according to local custom, buried, offered to the fire, or disposed of with specific ritual meaning, because in nearly every documented culture, this moment carried spiritual weight, not just medical necessity. Within hours, sometimes within a single day, evidence from contemporary hunter-gatherer groups studied by researchers, like Sussman suggests, the mother might already be walking short distances, the newborn wrapped against her body. There was no 6-week recovery period built into daily survival. The group adjusted its pace, but life did not stop. Here is the twist inside the twist. This ancient system, imperfect, sometimes fatal, deeply dangerous by any modern measure, was still remarkably effective at one specific thing: continuous, hands-on, socially supported care. A laboring woman was almost never alone. She was almost always upright and moving rather than confined to a bed. And she was surrounded by people who had personally been through labor themselves, not simply trained to observe it. Modern childbirth research has, in some ways, spent the last several decades rediscovering what your ancestors already knew. Continuous labor support from a trained companion, similar in spirit to that ancient birth attendant, is now associated in clinical studies with shorter labors and better outcomes. Upright birthing positions are returning to some birthing centers after nearly a century of hospitals defaulting to lying flat. The instinct to keep a mother in close physical contact with other experienced women wasn't superstition. It was 300,000 years of trial and error, encoded into cultural memory, because the alternative simply didn't survive. So here is where it lands, back on you. Somewhere in the structure of your own body is a compromise your species made a very long time ago. A trade between walking on 2 legs and thinking with a large brain. A trade that made birth harder and made community not optional, but essential. Every soft spot on a newborn's skull, every instinct a laboring woman has to seek out another woman's hand, every hospital policy that now encourages a support person in the delivery room, traces back to that same evolutionary bottleneck. You are about to give birth. There is no hospital. There is no doctor. There is only your body, your breath, and the people who chose to stay close to you. That was never a nightmare scenario. It was the original plan, and in more ways than you'd expect, it still is.